That night will be forever etched into my memory, no matter how hard I try to forget. The events were so disturbing, so inexplicable, that they've haunted me ever since. My friend and I went back over 40 years to our college days. We were two young guys from small towns who ended up as roommates our freshman year. From that first meeting, we forged an inseparable bond. We were crazy about the same things: cars, guitars, and chasing girls. We made a pact that we'd stay friends for life no matter what. After graduation, we both got jobs in the same city and continued living together for a few more years. Our late nights of way too many beers and howling at the moon created memories I'll never forget. We really lived it up in those days before eventually meeting our wives and settling into family life. But a stupid disagreement over some trivial matter drove an unfortunate wedge between us around 15 years ago. We stopped speaking and fell out of touch. I always figured we'd eventually make up and rekindle that old friendship flame. But years turned into decades without a word between us. Last night's dream seemed so vivid, so real. I was lounging in my recliner when the phone rang. It was my old friend calling, his warm, familiar voice tinged with that hint of gravel from too many nights of boozing in our youth. "Hey man, I've really missed you," he said with a sad chuckle. "I know it's been forever, but I was hoping we could get together soon and catch up over a few beers like the old days." I felt a pang of remorse at how much time had passed. "Yeah, absolutely. I've missed you too. We have so much to talk about and make up for." The conversation flowed easily, both of us filling in gaps about our lives, our jobs, our families. It was as if no time had passed at all between two lifelong best friends. When we finally said our goodbyes after making plans to meet up, I awoke with a contented smile. That feeling was shattered when the phone rang mid-morning. It was my nephew calling with tragic news. My friend had suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep and passed away peacefully without any suffering. According to his wife, he had been having some heart issues but didn't tell anyone, brushing it off as nothing serious. The doctor said the heart attack was likely brought on by years of hard living, smoky bars, greasy food, and too much booze. Pretty much exactly how we spent our youth together. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the cosmic timing. How could I have spoken to him so vividly just hours before his death? Was it merely an extremely well-timed coincidence? Or had his spirit somehow reached out to me one last time to make amends and say goodbye before passing on? A wave of sadness and regret washed over me. All those wasted years we let petty disagreements keep us apart. All the missed opportunities to rekindle that once inseparable friendship. If I had any inkling it would end this way, I would have swallowed my pride and reached out years ago. Now I'll never get that chance, and that haunts me as much as that final dreamlike call. A shiver ran down my spine and has never left me since. I'll never be able to unhear that haunting call from beyond the grave. Tom's dad was like a second father to me growing up. With my own dad working long hours, I spent countless afternoons and summers over at their place. Tom and I had been inseparable best friends since we were kids, but his dad always treated me like one of his own. I have so many great memories of his dad, playing catch in the backyard, him helping me with my math homework, the three of us watching baseball games together. He was one of the kindest, most patient men I knew, and you could tell the feeling was very much mutual between him and Tom. They had an incredibly close bond, always joking around and giving each other a hard time in that affectionate father-son way. Which is what made it so utterly devastating when his dad was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer my sophomore year of high school. The disease ravaged him so quickly. Within a year, this proud, energetic, life-of-the-party guy had become skeletal and bedridden, his existence whittled down to skin, bones, and labored breathing through an oxygen mask. Tom was completely shattered watching his hero deteriorate like that right before his eyes. He refused to leave his dad's side those final few months, sleeping in the recliner next to his bed. I remember him squeezing my hand with the grip strength of someone 3 times his age and telling me, "I'm not gonna leave him, bro. I can't leave him like this." When his dad finally passed away right before our senior year, it was like someone had scooped out Tom's soul along with him. At the funeral, I've never seen someone look so utterly hollow and empty. As we lowered that casket into the ground, it was like we were burying Tom right along with it. After the funeral, Tom started acting different, more withdrawn and sullen. I tried so hard to be there for him like he and his dad had been for me over the years, but he pushed me and most of his other friends away. I understood. I couldn't fathom the anguish of losing a parent like that, especially one you were as close with as Tom and his dad. A couple years went by and Tom remained a loner, still grieving the devastating loss of his best friend and father figure. It was like the light had permanently gone out in his eyes. We had made plans to be college roommates, but Tom deferred for a year, needing more time before he could move on with his life and our friendship. That's when the weird stuff started happening. I was over at Tom's house one day, just hanging out and trying to keep his spirits up. We were goofing around, taking some random pictures with his camera like idiots. When Tom went to look at the photos later, he froze and his face drained of all color. There, plain as day in one of the photos, was the unmistakable figure of his late father hunched over in a chair in the background. The sickly, bald figure looked exactly as Tom's dad had in those final weeks before passing, gaunt and frail from the ravages of cancer. Tom was utterly shaken to the core. He couldn't comprehend how his father's form could have been captured on camera like that. I tried to rationalize it, saying maybe it was a weird shadow or trick of the light. But Tom insisted, burying his face in his hands and weeping at the sight of his departed dad. Part of me desperately hopes this is all some product of Tom's fractured psyche, his mind protecting him by conjuring shards of his beloved father amidst the grieving process. But that photo, that pale, haunting figure trapped on film for eternity, silently screaming every time I look upon it. It seems far too visceral, too raw and anguished, to simply be a delusion or trick of the light. I fear that camera captured something that day which should never be seen, a glimpse straight into the eternal sufferings of the spirit world. And whatever echoes of Tom's father comprise that apparition, they have bored themselves deep into his tormented soul. So these days, whenever I'm with Tom and he inevitably pulls out that grisly photograph, tears streaming down his face while clutching it to his chest, I can't bring myself to look any longer. For each time I stare into the inky, haunted void surrounding that ghostly figure, I'm struck by the disquieting notion that it is staring back at me, silently asking to be released from its anguished purgatory. And I haven't the faintest idea how to grant that horrible, tantalizing mercy. I'll never forget what happened that dreadful morning. The memories are seared into my mind, haunting me no matter how much I try to rationalize or forget. My name is Marcus, a 35-year-old mid-level corporate consultant at one of the largest firms in the city. I travel constantly for my job, living out of soulless hotel rooms during the week before returning to my decent but unremarkable apartment for what little remains of a home life. I'm not an anxious person by nature. Dealing with demanding clients and tight deadlines pretty much cures you of that. But there's just something about that morning that shakes me to my core whenever I think back on it. I was back in my apartment, mentally preparing for another grueling week of meetings and presentations. I should have been well rested after a lazy Sunday watching TV and eating takeout, but my sleep was interrupted in the most petrifying way. I jolted awake, my heart pounding in my chest. Something wasn't right. My alarm clock hadn't gone off yet, but I was wide awake now at 5:32 a.m. I laid there listening to the silence, trying to figure out what had disturbed my sleep. That's when I saw it, a dark, shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. I froze, afraid that even the slightest movement would provoke whatever this thing was. "Who's there?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. The shadowy form didn't respond. It just stood there, unmoving, almost seeming to drink in the fearful energy radiating from me. I reached slowly towards the nightstand, my fingers wrapping around my phone. With a trembling hand, I managed to turn on the flashlight, the bright beam cutting through the darkness. The light revealed nothing but my empty bedroom. No sinister figure, no signs that anything was amiss. Just me lying in bed, suddenly freezing cold with terror. Had I imagined the whole thing? A waking nightmare brought on by too much late-night spreadsheet work before bed? I tried to convince myself of that, to slow my racing heart and caught breath. But in that moment, I could have sworn I saw the shadows in the corner of the room twist and distort, almost like whatever I had seen was retreating back into the inky blackness. My alarm finally went off at 6 a.m., making me jump. I hit snooze immediately, curling up tightly under the covers, my whole body tense. I knew I should get ready for work, but some primal part of my brain wouldn't allow me to leave the relative safety of my bed. As the sun began to peek through the curtains, logic started to reassert itself. I felt ridiculous for being so afraid of What exactly? I'm a 35-year-old corporate consultant, not a child scared of the dark. In all my years living in this apartment, I had never experienced anything remotely paranormal or unexplainable. The thought that my home could actually be haunted had never even crossed my mind. This place had always felt normal, safe even. Just a pragmatic bachelor pad in a bland unit in a decent part of town. Certainly not the kind of place you'd associate with any kind of supernatural occurrences. I finally forced myself to get up and start my morning routine, trying to push the lingering feelings of dread to the back of my mind. As unsettling as that experience was, at least it didn't seem to repeat itself over the following days and weeks. Part of me wondered if I had simply been trapped in the hazy trap between a nightmare and reality. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had encountered something inexplicably sinister that morning. Something that maybe, just maybe, was still there, waiting. For now, whatever I had witnessed that morning didn't make another appearance. But the memories of that shadowy figure remained burned into my psyche, leaving me to wonder if it had simply retreated, or was just biding its time until our next encounter.